Hey everybody, it's Diconius here. Wanted to say thanks for being patient and all the comments and views and subscriptions everybody's been giving me. I really appreciate it. Came down with bronchitis for a bit, and then Thanksgiving break was way more busy than I thought it would be. But finally, I have some time to sit down and record, and I just want to thank all you guys for your support. I've read pretty much all the comments. I've seen what you guys talk about, your own theories. It gets discussion going, which is always exciting. A lot of you saying, oh, you're looking too deeply into this. Trust me, I know. Nobody knows better than me, but I find it enjoyable. So yeah, this is why I'm doing it in the first place. But thank you all again. I saw some questions about the Star Platinum theory, reasons maybe why I'm wrong, or, questions like stuff that didn't make sense. I'll probably do a video in the future going back over this theory, refining it, and answering some questions. But right now I just want to go ahead and get another one of these out. And today we're going to look at evolving stands. Now, plenty of stands evolve. We've got Star Platinum to Star Platinum the World. We've got Killer Queen, of course, and all of its variations. We've got Requiem stands. We've got White Snake. We've got tons of stands that grow and evolve. But the main examples for evolving stands, and specifically this trait of different stages, is most notably found in Koichi's Echoes, Act 1 through 3, and Johnny Joestar's Tusk, Act 1 to 4. Now, both of these characters share similar traits, similar qualities that would grant them these evolving stands. However, Johnny's biggest difference is that he has an Act 4, and that begs the question, can Koichi get an Act 4? And today, that's what we're going to be discussing in Do You Understand? So first off, what's similar between Johnny and Koichi? Well, first of all, they start from a pretty low point in their lives. Maybe not necessarily Koichi, but they both have a lot of room to grow as people. They both lack self-confidence, they both have sort of problems with cowardice and maybe being weak-willed. They kind of have weak bodies or have issues guarding that, such as, Koichi was born prematurely, he's short, he's not very muscular. Johnny is paraplegic, probably has several issues in that regard. He is strong enough to ride a horse, but you get what I mean. And the most important thing is they're forced to gain abilities. They're forced to gain stands. Not necessarily against their will, but they probably wouldn't be able to gain them otherwise, such as Koichi gets stabbed with the arrow, and he was going to die, but Josuke healed him, and he survived. And when you survive the stand process, no matter what the case is, you're going to get a stand. We're going to look at that in another episode. But, equally, Johnny also gets the corpse part and gains Tusk Act 1. But when he does lose his corpse part, he does lose his ability, so it goes to show that he isn't strong enough at that point to keep his stand. But they do grow into it, and they're forced to grow because of these abilities, and they do meet the challenge. And as they grow through the story, as they gain more self-confidence, and as they learn to face problems head-on and challenge their demons, they gain more acts. Each act has a base ability, with Koichi it being sounds, and with Johnny it being his nail bullets. Each stage provides a new ability or a new form of the previous stand, and they can switch between them at any point, but the further along in the acts, the more powerful the stand becomes, with some sacrifices. But why did Johnny get an Act 4 while Koichi didn't? Well, the most important thing is Johnny is a Joestar, he is a main JoJo character, so of course he would probably have a more stronger stand than Koichi. But the most important thing is he is put to the test. He is put in an extremely stressful battle with President Valentine and D4C Love Train, and along with the Super Spin, he is forced to grow and defeat the stand with an even more powerful ability, Tusk Act 4, which is one of the most powerful abilities in JoJo. And he's pushed to the brink because he was all alone and he had to defeat Valentine in this incredibly powerful stand ability that was practically unbeatable. Now, why didn't Koichi get an Act 4? Why didn't he ever grow into an Act 4 if getting an Act 4 is possible? Well, at the time, he was the first, so basically, probably the idea of an Act 4 hadn't crossed Araki's mind. But let's just delve into this further and just assume that it was always possible to grow. Well, for the first thing, Act 3 is a pretty useful ability. 3 freeze specifically becomes very essential to fights and finally defeating Kira. But after Koichi gains Act 3, he's never in a similarly stressful situation such as the sheer heart attack Kira fight. he is evolved in fights, and he does get somewhat defeated by other people, but he's never in that same sort of stressful scenario where he's forced to grow, because he has friends. He has Okuyasu, Josuke, Jotaro, and Rohan to help him out, and they're mostly the main targets of, whatever villain stand is attacking them towards the end of Part 4. He's not really forced to grow and gain Act 4 of Echoes. And we even see in Part 5 that he hasn't really developed any further past Act 3 either, and even his potential lowers kind of a tiny bit, as well as some other stats, but that's just natural for pretty advanced stand users, that their stats lower, not because they're weaker, but because they understand the limits of their own abilities. However, his potential lowered, which is notable because his potential is still an A when he gets Act 3, so there is still room for growth. But it goes down to a B, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it goes to show that Koichi isn't really focused on furthering or growing his abilities much more. And potential isn't necessarily about the stand itself, it definitely is indicative of how far you can go with the stand, but potential is more about the user, and how willing the user is to grow his abilities in terms of ambition or a form of survival. As we see with Hermit Purple, its potential is very low. And that's not because you can't do stuff with it, as we see with just one scene with Dio, where he doesn't break the camera when he uses it. Joseph obviously has much more to learn about his stand. And I would even say that Hermit Purple is pretty much the Tusk or the ball breaker of Hamon, and that we still have no idea what the true potential of furthering Hermit Purple is, but Joseph is old and Joseph hates hard work, so we'll never probably see the full potential of Hermit Purple. And that's not Hermit Purple's fault, that's Joseph's fault. And the same can be said for Koichi. We never see the full extent of Act 3, or if he could get Act 4, but not because he's lazy, but for other reasons, and we'll get into that in a bit. The most important thing, though, is Koichi isn't in a scenario in which he needs to grow further. So let's say he is, for the sake of this theory. Let's say Josuke, Jotaro, Okuyasu, Rohan, let's say his allies die, or are defeated, incapacitated. He has to be the main hero. He has to take charge and fight against stand users that are now targeting him. This forces him to not only fight more stand users, but probably in the very end have to fight Kira himself, a fully matured Kira with Bites the Dust. And while Hayato may be able to help him in whatever scenario this is, he's still got to be able to defeat him. He still has to have an ability that can stop his explosions like Josuke, or that can combat Bites the Dust. And how is that possible? Well, for instance, I have a theory about Act 3, and that is Act 3 has much more to it than we've seen. You see, Act 3 isn't very good at explaining its abilities. It's very I just did it, whatever, blah blah. That's just Act 3. That's its personality. However, from the one time he did explain his ability, it's indicative of something that I don't think many people have picked up on. When he uses 3 freeze, he says he simply changed the word 3 to freeze. So my theory is that his ability is based on whatever he can rhyme with 3. 3 freeze, for example, doesn't really freeze anything, but it puts a lot of gravity on someone so they can't move. 3 free, F-R-E-E, could be the opposite. It removes gravity, so they're floating in the air. 3 tree could plant one of their limbs in the ground or something, similar to freeze. 3 green could maybe make them very sick, very ill, make them green in the face. 3 B could make them have anaphylactic shock. I don't know. These are all just theories, but it would make an extremely versatile stand, sort of like Crazy Diamond, to fight off all the other stand users. But still, we've got to defeat Kira and Bites the Dust. And while Josuke does get help from Hayato, and in the end, everyone sort of pitches in to defeat Kira, if Koichi is somewhat alone against this terrifying serial killer with a time ability, he's got to grow further. He has to have a stand that can defeat Kira. And so that would be Act 4. Echoes Act 4. Now, what would Echoes Act 4 be? Well, call me uncreative, but honestly, the perfect Echoes Act 4 ability would basically be In a Silent Way. In a Silent Way is Sandman / Soundman's stand in Part 7. It's basically Echoes Act 2, but way more powerful in terms of an ability. It can basically manipulate and store sounds, whereas Act 1, 2, and 3 are only able to create their own sounds and use them, and Act 2 can only create one of them. In a Silent Way can light a match and then take the sound of that match and then throw it at somebody and now they're on fire. It could take maybe an attack on them, like a bullet. It could take the sound of the bullet, turn it into the Japanese lettering of the sound effect, and use it as a shield against the bullet itself. Basically, it negates Killer Queen's explosions. If it could take the sound of the explosion or the detonating click that Killer Queen has and then just take it into sound form and throw it somewhere else, maybe even at Kira, that practically negates his ability. Or he can just create any sound and then use it as a shield to deflect against Killer Queen's air bombs. And what's even better is that during the final fight, it is raining. And as we see in part 7, sound travels more easily through water. So maybe as like the final trip up against Kira, maybe he steps into a puddle. Guess what? Koichi already put a sound in there that will kill him. It would be a very powerful stand, and combined with Act 3's immobilizing abilities and help from Hayato or any of his other allies, Koichi could defeat Kira. So this is a scenario, of course. It didn't happen. Koichi never really got to this point, and this is all speculation and non-canon, and why give a fuck? What's the point of speculation at this point? You know, if we have to create this fake scenario. Well, not only is it kind of fun to do so, as I've explained before, but it's interesting to note Koichi never reaches further. He never goes past this point. We never see what lies beyond Act 3, or what lies beyond 3 Freeze, in fact. An important thing about stands. Stands evolve and grow and gain new abilities under stressful situations, typically fighting, typically trying to survive. The only exception is if you're someone like Dio, or Kira, or Pucci, or Diavolo, or Valentine, who are unsatisfied with reality, are unsatisfied with their position, are unsatisfied with the way things are and what fate has chosen for them, and go so far as to commit heinous things in order to become more powerful. And becoming stronger, as we've seen and have been told, isn't necessary for a happy life. Koichi is perfectly fine by the time he gets Act 3. He's grown as a person, he's gained more self-confidence. We see him going from a weak-willed sort of, oh yes sir, yeah sure I'll do this, and getting coerced into doing things and falling victim to stand traps and stuff like that. He's gotten a lot more self-confidence. We see in Highway Star and Cheap Trick. He's not letting anybody step over him anytime. He takes action, he stands up for himself, and by that point he's pretty secure in his abilities. He's grown a lot. He was a person who was going to die from the stand arrow. It's pretty good that he didn't have to. I mean, as we see, Jotaro's burdened by being one of the strongest stand users. And as we see from Johnny, after he gets Act 4, his life doesn't necessarily go perfectly, and it's not necessarily a good thing that he has Act 4, because ultimately it leads to his demise in a way. Koichi's a reliable guy. He's a good friend, he's a good person, he's kind-hearted and courageous. And the fact that he never had to get to Act 4, the fact that he never had his friends die, the fact that he can live a normal life after everything, I'd say he did pretty well. Anyways, that was the video, that was my theory. I hope you guys liked it. Leave comments down below. What do you think Act 4 would be if Koichi reached it? And what do you think about Act 3's further abilities? Do you think I'm right? Do you think I'm on a logical path, or am I just reaching again? Let me know down below. And suggest theories and other videos to do, other stands, and even vampires, Pillarmen, Hamon, Spin, any of those strange abilities and goings on. If you have any questions or possible ideas for theories, leave them down below and I'll look at them. I definitely have a lot of ideas planned ahead. Hopefully I can do this more routinely and there won't be such long breaks. But I want to thank you all again for your support and sticking with me. I am really happy to keep doing these videos again, and I hope that you guys enjoy them. Anyways, it's been Diconius, and... Do you understand?